Canada. It was a computer system. I got a computer system, right? I have a physical, but I have a digital. I have the information inside. So there are some similarities. There are some differences, mind you, because somehow between Canada and here, what was the attack vector? How did they get there? More than likely, how did they get from Canada to here to attack my system? They didn't walk. What did they do? Internet, right? And in the internet, it probably took 10, 12, 15 hops, 15 different nodes it had to go through. Oh, are any of those potential scenes? Do you think there's any information that might be relevant on any one of those hops in between? Yeah, there might. And how basically do I protect that crime scene? So although it's similar, we still have to be aware that there are some subtle differences. For our purposes, though, we're going to consider the primary scene and the secondary scene. We can identify it. We can see it. Even if it's in a log file, we can touch it. We can see it. We can go out and look at it. Although we might have to look at it electronically, we can still see that information. In fact, there has been some research done on attacker profiles, for lack of a better term. Internet child pornography. There's a body of literature out there looking at, okay, who makes up this group? What are their unique characteristics? We have categories like producers. We have categories like basically a curious collector. We have categories like hardcore collector. And because of the fact that these individuals have come to the attention of authorities through the different sting operations, through the different news media shows that do their own sting operations, through the fact that probably a good 60, if not 80% of law enforcement effort in cyberspace is based on child pornography, we have a wealth of data there. And we're starting to see these patterns. We're starting to see things. We're starting to see characteristics. We're starting to see unique or discriminant characteristics popping out, which allows us to put people, pigeonhole them into these different groups. Say, here's what you need to look for. Internet stalkers, we're seeing it with that. Internet predators. Hackers, not so much. We're starting to look at that. Virus writers, cyber terrorists, and criminal insiders. We're starting to see work in this area identifying characteristics, behaviors, traits that allow us now to start saying, okay, we may be able to differentiate between one type, one group versus another. Well, what questions does an investigator need answered in cyberspace, in cybercrimes? Well, guess what? It's usually case-specific. What kind of an offender? They may want to know, is this person experienced? Is this person inexperienced? Is this an individual versus a group? Why would that be important? Why would you want to know if it's an individual or a group? Yes?
Funding.
Funding, yeah, exactly. All of a sudden it moves from your one-off person to maybe organized crime. So that becomes an important. Are you going to see those two cases, those two contexts are slightly different, right? You want to look at those different. Sometimes you'll get these threats. In the UK, there was basically a really subtle extortion ring. They'd go around claiming to have placed child pornography on servers of businesses, phone the businesses up and say, hey, you either pay us X amount of money or we'll tell the police and release it to the press that you have child porn on your servers. And by the way, this isn't traceable. You can't prove that you didn't do it. When I first heard that, I kind of laughed, and some of my friends over in Europol said, no, they're paying. The companies are paying. Which makes me wonder what they actually had on there in the first place. But they're paying. So when you get these threats, when you get these individuals or these groups or these organizations threatening to do something, what's important is, will they act on these threats? Somebody comes on as a member of one of the terrorist groups and says, we are going to do X to the internet. We're going to take it down. We're going to take all 13 of the DNS primary routers out. We're going to crash the whole thing. Well, is this just somebody blowing smoke? Or does this individual or individuals have the capability of doing it? Will they act on it? That becomes important. Hopefully when somebody gets caught or somebody gets brought in for an interview, it becomes important to understand, how do you talk to these people? How do you approach the interview and interrogation process? Do you attack it like the father confessor? Oh, tell me your sins. I want to hear this. That's one school of thought that works. The other is, do you want to basically buddy up to them? Oh, I can understand it. Oh, yes, what you did wasn't so bad. Oh, yeah, Which actual method, which strategy do you use? If you use the wrong one, you won't get anything out of somebody. If you use the right one, quite often, they will tell you a lot of information. So that becomes extremely important. As I mentioned, there's a body of literature that's starting to evolve related to these different groups. What's really interesting, though, is looking at that kind of that generic group, that hacker group we talked about. And this is where it's a little gray. Obviously, one of the issues of dealing with hackers or computer criminals in general is really it's an ill-defined category, isn't it? The term hacker or computer criminal doesn't necessarily refer to a homogeneous group, does it? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about somebody that's a script kiddie, somebody that's just new at this? Or are we talking about somebody that's being funded by a large organization, a professional criminal, or a terrorist group? They're both using technology. They both fall under this rubric of a computer criminal. But I'd argue they have distinct characteristics, the motivations, the training, the experience, the funding. Their ability to actually act on their threats is different. So one of the things that's required is looking at, we've got to have some kind of a model to work with. We need to develop what's called a taxonomy. And really a taxonomy is nothing more than a way of separating a large group into smaller groups so you can have some type of discussion. It's not the be-all, live-all, end-all. It's a way of starting a discussion. One taxonomy, this is one of the taxonomies that we've been developing, which actually has some utility we found, is something called the Circumplex model. There's two types. There's the Circumplex, which is a way of representing some very complex relationships. Quite often you'll see these things called the continuum, right? There's a continuum with somebody at this end, somebody at the other end, and somebody is slightly in between, either a 0 or a 10. They're somewhere on that continuum. The problem with the continuum is unidimensional. It usually allows you to express really only one relationship, right? One variable. The nice thing about a circumplex model is it becomes two-dimensional. It allows you to show interactions. It allows you to show some more complex relationships. You have an ordered circumplex where the position at a specific spot on that model I'll show you has a specific meaning. You have the modified where actually now you have the x and the y now mean something completely different, depending upon what characteristics you have mapped to those. It's really also a very good method for eyeballing the fit of a model, because that's what we're dealing with now. We're trying to develop a model that has some investigative utility. One way to develop a good model is you eyeball it. You look at it. Does this make sense? Have I got gaps? Have I got holes? Have I got everybody clustered over here and nobody in these other quadrants? Basically the hacker circumplex, for lack of a better term, was basically based on a meta-analysis of previous research that's been done. So basically we went back and we looked. What's been done to date? What's the current state of the research? What models do we have? What is anecdotal based and what is actually evidence based? What is based on actual research that can hold up to basically empirical scrutiny? And two primary components popped out when we went through the literature. Skill and motivation. And for the most part, skill used to be on kind of a continuum, from no skill to high skill. Motivation, then, we were able to break into what we call 4 high-level domains. And really, we looked at 8 types. Obviously, this is not the end point. It's merely a starting point. What we have in this picture, then, is the hacker circumplex. You've got the 4 quadrants, which indicate basically the motivation. Was the motivation revenge? Was it financial? Was it curiosity? Was it notoriety? What motivation did that person have? Obviously, only having 4 is a little simplistic. But these popped out as basically if you looked at the factor analysis, these popped out as the 4 primary areas, the 4 primary types of motivation. Within there, then, you have the pluses. Should be pluses and minuses. Minus, the closer you are to the origin, the less your skill is. The farther you're out from the origin, the higher your skill level is. And the groups that got broken into this are novices, cyberpunks, petty thieves, virus writers, old guard hackers, professional criminals, information warriors, political